Hey there, team. Let's have a look at exercise 9C, question 7, specifically C and D, but I'm just going to quickly run through A and B here. We can see that the question says that you have an amount of $35,000 that you want to invest in. Let me just pick the color. $35,000. No, actually, it's what you're borrowing. So the bank is loaning you $35,000 and 20 years at 10.5% per annum. So compounded monthly is the key terms there. Write all answers in the question correct to the nearest cent unless otherwise advised, and then use rounded payments and balance values in subsequent calculations. Okay, so that's going to be key. That means we're going to be rounding it and then using that next value. So part A asks you to what are the payments for the loan. So you want to know how much are you repaying. If you're borrowing $35,000 for 20 years and you know the rate is 10.5% per annum, compounded monthly. So here we go. Again, I've got the finance solver screenshotted over here, but let's do it over here. On your CAS, go to menu, finance solver. We go to finance solver over here, and I'm just going to delete them all just so that we know what we're working with. So at N, I've got 20 years, right? But because it's compounded monthly, that means over 20 years, the number of payments I'm going to do is 12 a year. So that means 20 times 12 is the number of payments I'm going to make. I'm going to press tab. Okay, so press tab, moves me on to the next one. So that means in total, after 20 years, I should do 240 payments in total, right? So those are the number of payments. Doesn't tell me the value of the payment. Interest rate we know is 10.5% per annum, and remember you use the nominal rate, which is the one that is per annum, so 10.5%. And then the PV, which is your initial value, you borrowed $35,000. Now remember, I'm keeping this positive because it's what the bank gives me. So with me right now, I have $35,000, not negative $35,000, even though in reality, technically you owe the bank $35,000. So hence it should be negative. But for the sake of what we're doing right now, I'm going to write $35,000 as positive, meaning it's money within me that I have. Hence I have $35,000 to use. Okay. So I have $35,000. I don't know what my repayments are. I don't know how much I'm paying back every month, but I do know that after 20 years, I want it to be zero. I want to pay it all off in 20 years. So the final value, FV, should be $0. And payments per year, well, there should be 12 payments every year, and hence compounded 12 times every year as well. All right, so I'm going to just quickly tab all the way back to PMT. And here, this is where I press enter in PMT, and that will calculate for me the payments that I should be making every month for 240 payments, which is 20 years, and that should get me to a final value of 0. Okay, so that's what I screenshotted for A. Now let's go on to B. B says, how much interest is paid on the loan over 20 years to the nearest $100? Well, to know interest, you need to know after 20 years, how much have you, I guess, paid overall? So how much did you pay overall? Because you only borrowed $35,000, it's very likely that after all those compound of interest that you're not going to be paying $35,000. You're going to be paying much, much more. So the question is, how much did you have to pay extra? That's the interest. That's the interest included, right? So anything more than $35,000 is going to be interest. That's what it is, okay? So the question is, how much is it worth after 20 years? Well, let's see how much you would have done the payments. Well, you know that you're paying $349, and if we round it to the nearest cent, $349.43. Okay, so 43 cents. This is how much you're paying per month. So if you had 240 payments over 12 years, well, then how much did you pay? Well, part of B, that would mean that the first step is I need to know $349.43 multiplied to 240 months, because each month is how much you're paying, but you know that over 20 years, there are 240 months of payments. So multiplying that should tell you the total amount that you're paying overall. So I'm just going to go here and press escape, and I'm going to do $349.43 times 240, and that works out to be $83,863.20. Okay, so I'm going to just put it over here. So this is my calculation here. Oh, it's not the... Oh, where'd it go? I just lost it. All right, let's just move it out here and then move it back here. So this is how much I would have paid over 20 years. Okay, so the $83,863.20 is what I paid over 20 years. But remember, I only borrowed $35,000. So clearly I paid much more over 20 years, didn't I? So how much more did I pay? Well, let's work it out. 83,863 minus what I initially borrowed. I borrowed $35,000. And you can see here, this is how much I paid extra. See, if I only borrowed $35,000, yet after 20 years, why am I not paying $35,000 only? Well, it's because you're paying interest as well. So this is my second step of my calculation over here. And I can say in my calculation, I now know I'm paying this much extra. So this is an extra amount. $48,863.20 is how much I paid extra. And hence this is called your interest because I only borrowed $35,000 and that extra $48,000 is clearly coming out of interest over 20 years. Okay, but remember they want you to use rounded payment and balance values in subsequent calculations. I thought it said somewhere nearest cent unless otherwise advised. Somewhere said nearest 100. Oh, there it is. To the nearest $100. Okay, so to the nearest $100, nearest 100. So this is 83,863 is close. Oh, no, sorry. Wait, this is my answer. $48,863.20 is closest to $48,900 because it's closest 100. Okay, so $48,900 is how much I paid in interest. And then moving on to now question C. Okay, so C, I'm just going to write it over here. Oh, there we go. C asks us how much is still owing at the end of 4 years? Okay, so we're going back to our finance solver, menu 8.1. How much is still owing after 4 years? Well, 4 years, okay, remember you're paying $349.43 every month. Now, 4 years, this is 20 years here. 4 years, so 4 years multiplied to how many payments would you have made in 4 years? Well, 4 with 12 payments a year, it's 4 times 12. That tells me I've got 48 payments, right? And it's still, interest rate is still 10.5% per annum. You did borrow at $35,000 and you're paying $349. And so you want to know what the final value is after 4 years. So here I'm going to press enter and that gives me the value. As you can see, negative means that I still need to pay this much more. That's still the amount that I still owe the bank. Okay, so I still have a negative value there. So I'm going to go back here. For C, I'm just going to move it up and say this is part C. So you can see there, this is C now. So C tells me what I've just calculated is after 4 years, how much should still be available. So I still have $32,437.72, rounded to nearest cent is 73 cents. Okay. So what are the new payments? Oh, sorry, no. C was how much you're still owing. Yep, cool. Now it says after 4 years, the interest rate rises to 13.75% per annum. So what does that mean? That just means now you started off at 10.5% per annum, but now it is 13.75% per annum. And it says, what are the new payments that will see the amount repaid in 20 years? So you still have this 20-year loan, but remember the 20 years, so think of this as your timeline. If this is 20 years and this is when you first started, after 4 years into the payment, this was only 10.5%. But what they've done now is they've increased it from here to here. It is now 13.75%. But you only need to pay for the next 16 years, right? So in the first 4 years, how much of it have you reduced down? Because initially you started off at borrowing $35,000, true? That was 35, and you're hoping by 20 years you end up at $0. Now, after 4 years, we calculated it before that this is how much you owe now. Instead of 35,000, so this is 35,000, you now owe 32,437.73. Okay? That's rounded to the nearest cent. So what you're going to do now is you're going to take this answer, which is what C was. You're going to take the answer C, and that's your new PV value with your new interest rate, isn't it? And you know the timing is now another 16 years, no longer 20 years, because you only need another 16 to make the full 20-year loan. And then you finish at 20 to get a zero value. So on my CAS here, this is what you should be doing for D. You only have 16 more years multiplied to 12 payments a year. So 16 times 12 tells you the number of payments in those 16 years left. The rate is no longer 10.5, it is 13.75%. And your owing value, you now don't owe 35,000. After 4 years, you only owe 32,437.73 if you round it off. I'm not sure if they want you to round it off. I'm just going to write the full value. So 7269678. Okay. Payment is what you want to know. And remember, your final value, you want it to be 0 after the 20 years. So now you're trying to figure out the payments. So here, this is where I highlight PMT and I press enter, and it should recalculate after 16 years at a new interest rate, at a new starting value where you compound monthly, what is the new payment. So I press enter, and that tells me now that the new payment should be 418. So remember, it's negative because it's coming out of your pocket, right? So for D, question D here, I'm just going to paste it here. D. Let me just write this as D. D tells me the new payment has to be then $418.65 rounded to the nearest cent. Okay, so that is my payments per month, answering D. And then E, how much extra must now be repaid on the loan over the term of 20 years to the nearest $100. So how much extra must now be repaid? You essentially just multiply 418 by 0.65 by the remaining number of years, and then you can compare to your original amount how much extra you would have needed to pay. So if we quickly did that on our CAS here, let's see, I'm just going to move this back, press escape, and then $418.65. You got another 16 years, but how many payments is that? So 418, that's per month. So times 16 years times 12 will give you the number of full payments. So you would have paid $80,000, 380.8. But remember, that's with what you already paid extra, like what you already paid, and you paid already. How much did you pay again? You already paid 35,000. Whoops, 35,000. Sorry, let me fix that. 35,000 minus 32,437.73. That's the 4 years, and we can see that that's the total amount that you had paid. But I think the question actually just wants you to say how much more do you need to pay to finish it off, and really the answer should be 80,380, but rounding to the nearest 100 should be then $80,400 is how much more you need to pay to finish off your term in 20 years. Okay, that's how much extra you'd need to pay. Cool?